From the kitchen of the cabin, it's the 5 Games for Doomsday review. Spyrium. My first Essen was extremely ad hoc. I'd submerged myself into gaming and was blissfully gliding through the deeps of the hobby. I just moved to Germany and knew enough of its geography to know that it contained Essen. Everyone in gaming talked about Essen. 2 weeks before the event, I scoured hotel websites looking for something cheap and rose from the Mariana Trench of the internet with something that cost me €22 a night. I shared a room with a man and his teenage daughter. Not a word passed between us in the days we spent together. They were sleeping when I left, and they were sleeping when I arrived back. The only sign that I'd ever been there was the steadily growing pile of games and the blood-curdling screams from my congenital night terrors. Millions of words have been written and digital vats of virtual ink have been spilt, eulogizing Essen, Gen Con and conventions in general. Barns full of innocently hyperbolic paragraphs containing adjectives like awesome and life-changing cover the internet landscape and reap bushels of upvotes. This isn't one of those pieces. I'll leave those pieces to the people who enjoy the devotional adjective more than me. Safe to say, I broadly agree with those sentiments and welcome the billions and billions of words that will cover that well-trodden ground in the future. I mention my first Essen for 2 reasons. Firstly, it was where I bought, on a whim, 5 minutes before leaving, the game I'm writing about in this piece. And secondly, because I'm incurably prolix and need a 300-word run-up on any topic I choose to handle. This is a piece about a game I love. A game I have had many hours of enjoyment from, and a game I still play. This is a piece, as you would have already guessed by the title, about Spyrium by William Attia. Spyrium is little remembered today, a scant 4 years after its release, but it was quite the thing at the time. This was the follow-up from the person who had designed the Titanic Kalis, and that was a big deal. The game's subsequent descent into the annals of obscurity is a shame, an understandable shame, but a shame nevertheless. But why is it understandable, I hear you ask? If you love the game so much, you should be bemused at its fall from grace rather than accepting, shouldn't you? Shouldn't you? I shouldn't. And if you'll calm down for 2 minutes, I'll explain why. There's the theme. It exists, but barely. There's nothing to grab onto, nothing that plunges hooks into the flanks of your imagination. The players are people that are doing something for Queen Victoria with some new mineral or something. There is a lot of muddy brown and men in steampunk spectacles. In fact, if muddy brown is your thing, then you've found Xanadu. Everything is caked in it, and what isn't caked in brown is smeared with the grey and black smut of the factory. It seems the graphic designer had taken Friedrich Engels and George Eliot as their jumping off point, and just got drabber from there. Also, the game is modest. It comes in a small box and doesn't boast the kind of toys that are so in vogue. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't have shelf presence. I take a pause to scrub myself after using that phrase. It uses a fantasy theme but barely, and has components that do their job rather than drink the entire Caledonian oil reserves in their production. It's an exquisite and quiet game, so subsequently gets drowned out by the neon roar of plastic and apps. It is wonderful though, so in my small way I want to try and amplify it and bring it to a wider audience. I love crunchy decisions. The crunchier the better. I absolutely hate it when someone leaves the bag of decisions open overnight and they go all soft. I want my decisions to be audible 10 rows down in the cinema, and Spyrium is just one modest cardboard box full of crunchy decisions. Game designers like to reiterate systems, and William Attia is no exception. Worker placement rests on the twin pillars of Agricola and Kalis, but Spyrium shows a greater departure from the subtle steps forward that Uwe Rosenberg makes in his iterative designs. There is worker placement in Spyrium, but the system has been gutted and rebuilt from scratch. The chassis is old and battered, but the engine is running on hyperkinetic cryofuel. Cards are placed out in a grid, and workers are placed in between, giving players an option of which card they can activate. Couple that with the fact that removing a worker can also furnish you with the cash needed to do the actions in the first place, the simple act of plopping down a meeple becomes a tactical game of chicken, where the person who blinks first can lose vital coins, or have the one building that completes their plan swiped from under their nose. Placement and activation are separated into different phases here, like in a traditional worker placement game, but the decision of when to make the transition between phases is decided on by the player independently. Do you place all of your workers and get more actions but run the risk of being gazumped? Or do you pull the trigger quickly, giving you fewer options but letting you operate quicker? The cost of actions are determined by the prices on the cards, but also the amount of workers that surround it. So waiting is cheaper and money is tight. But if you wait, someone could jump ahead of you and steal that vital component of your machine. Timing is everything in Spyrium, and it is in that the joyous crunch of the game emerges. I have to declare a bias here. Those games that I bought at my first Essen are tainted with the gossamer corruption of nostalgia. It's as if they're smeared with Vaseline and bathed in candlelight, so that whenever I look at them, they appear in 80s soft focus, but, importantly, most of them haven't been played since. Spyrium has, and recently too, and I can say without reservation that it is as good and crunchy now as it was that first night when punch-drunk and booze-drunk I tore off the cellophane, laid it out on the table, started the machine and watched it chug under my inelegant fingers. I recommend you do the same. I recommend you go to wherever you can find this game and buy it. Spend hard cash on this game that some rando on the internet is gushing about. Don't look at the cover or the size of the box. Give the person behind the counter your money, then rush home and start up this wonderful machine. I promise you, you won't regret it. You can contact me on @5gamesfordoomsday on Twitter, or 5gamesfordoomsday.com, or 5gamesfordoomsday@gmail.com.